June wiped the grease from his hands as he looked at the old car engine. It was almost midnight, but he wanted to finish this job. His small garage in Seoul was quiet except for the soft music playing from an old radio. Outside, rain tapped against the metal roof. Just one more hour, he told himself, reaching for a wrench. The light in the garage flickered. June looked up, thinking it might be the storm. Then all the lights went out. Before he could reach for his flashlight, a new light appeared, bright, blue, and coming from everywhere at once. The blue light grew stronger. June raised his arm to shield his eyes. The tools on his workbench began to float. The radio stopped playing. June felt his feet leave the ground. "What's happening?" he shouted, but his voice sounded strange in his ears. The roof of his garage seemed to disappear. The blue light pulled him upward through the open space. For a moment, he saw the city lights of Seoul spread out below him. Then came darkness. When June opened his eyes, he was lying on a smooth floor that felt like metal, but was warm to the touch. The walls around him curved upward, glowing with a soft light. This was not his garage. This was not any place he knew. "Hello," his voice echoed in the empty room. A section of the wall slid open. Two figures stepped inside. They looked almost human, except for their height, at least 7 feet tall, and their eyes, which were larger and had a slight glow to them. "The human is awake," one said. June blinked in surprise. The words didn't sound like Korean or any language he knew, yet he understood them perfectly. "How can I understand you?" he asked, slowly standing up. "Translation field," the second figure said, pointing to a small device on its wrist. "Your brain receives our words in ways it can process." The figures wore uniforms that shifted colors like oil on water. They stood straight, their faces showing no emotion. "What is this place? Why am I here?" Jung demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "You are aboard the vessel Starlight, flagship of the 7 systems. You have been selected for an audience with Queen Hana," the first guard explained. "Selected? I didn't agree to this." June felt anger pushing away his fear. "You can't just take people from their homes." The guards looked at each other, then back at June. "Many would consider this a great honor," the second guard said. "You are the first human to be chosen in your species' history." Before June could argue more, they gestured toward the doorway. "Please follow us. It is not wise to keep the queen waiting." With no real choice, June walked between them as they led him through corridors that seemed to be made of crystal and metal. The floors hummed beneath his feet. Through large windows, he saw stars and unfamiliar planets. This was no dream or trick. He was truly in space, on an alien ship. Other beings passed them in the hallways. Some looked nearly human. Others were very different, with extra limbs or skin that changed colors. They all stopped to stare at June. "Why me?" June asked as they walked. "Of all the people on Earth, why take me?" "The Queen will explain," was the only answer. They arrived at a massive doorway that stood at least 20 feet tall. Symbols that looked like moving stars decorated its surface. Beyond this door is the throne room of Queen Hana, ruler of the 7 galactic systems, guardian of the void stars, and keeper of the eternal light, one guard announced formally. The other guard looked at June with what might have been pity. "When you address the queen, bow your head and do not speak until spoken to. Your life depends on proper respect." The giant doors began to open, revealing a room larger than any June had ever seen. Light poured out, almost blinding him. The guards nudged him forward. June stepped into the throne room, his heart pounding in his chest. Whatever was about to happen would change his life forever. The throne room was bigger than any place June had ever seen. The ceiling rose so high he could barely see it. Hundreds of strange beings stood in neat rows on both sides of a long path that led to the throne. June walked forward, feeling small. The floor beneath him was clear, showing stars and space below, as if he walked on glass above the universe itself. At the end of the path sat the throne. It wasn't made of gold or stone as June expected. Instead, it looked like liquid metal that moved and changed shape, flowing like water but shining like silver. On this strange throne sat Queen Hana. She looked almost human, but more perfect. Her skin had a slight glow to it. Her hair was black with strands that seemed to contain tiny stars. Her eyes were large and dark, but when she blinked, June saw colors in them like distant galaxies. The crown on her head was the strangest thing of all. It seemed to hold tiny moving planets and stars within it, a miniature universe circling her head. "Approach, human," she said, her voice soft, but filling the entire room. June stepped closer, remembering to bow his head as the guards had warned him. "I am Queen Hana, ruler of the 7 galactic systems," she said. "And you are June, a mechanic from the planet Earth." "How do you know my name?" June asked, surprised enough to forget his fear. A small smile touched her lips. "We have been watching your planet for a long time. Your species is young, but interesting to us." A tall, stern-looking man stepped forward from beside her throne. He wore armor that seemed to be made of the same flowing metal as the throne. "My queen, is this truly the one?" "He looks like nothing special," he said, looking at June with cold eyes. "Commander Te, you know I do not make mistakes," Queen Hana replied calmly. "Our scanners found him to have the neural patterns we seek." June looked back and forth between them. "Neural patterns? What are you talking about? Why am I here?" The queen raised her hand, and everyone in the room fell silent. "Every 100 years, I select one being from an emerging world to receive a great honor," she explained. "I grant them 3 wishes." Whispers spread through the crowd. June noticed many of the aliens were looking at him with what seemed like jealousy. "3 wishes," June repeated, "like a genie in a bottle." Queen Hana laughed, a sound like music. "Your Earth stories have many versions of wish-granting beings. We are the source of those tales, from the few times humans glimpsed our visits in your past." "But why me?" June asked again. The queen leaned forward. "Your mind, June. We tested thousands of humans secretly. Your brain shows unusual patterns when solving problems. You think differently. This interests me." Commander Tai made a sound like a growl. "Humans are barely out of their caves, my queen. They still fight wars over land and invisible gods. This one fixed machines with primitive tools just hours ago. Perhaps that is why his perspective will be valuable," Queen Hana replied, then turned back to June. "What do you think of our ship? Of me?" June took a deep breath. "I think I'm either dreaming or I've been kidnapped by the most advanced beings I've ever seen. Either way, I'm not happy about it." The court gasped at his boldness. Commander Tai reached for a weapon at his side, but Queen Hana raised her hand, stopping him. "Honesty. Good," she said. "Many beings who come before me only offer flattery." She stood from her throne, and June saw she was much taller than he had thought, at least 7 feet in height. Her dress seemed to contain moving stars, like her crown. "You will have 3 wishes, June of Earth, anything within my considerable power to grant. You have 24 hours to consider your first wish." She clapped her hands once, and a young woman stepped forward. She looked more human than the others, with a kind face and curious eyes. "This is Jin, my aide. She will show you to your quarters and answer your questions." Queen Hana smiled. "Rest well, June. Tomorrow you will make your first wish." As Jin led him away, Jun heard Commander Tai speaking to the queen. "He will wish for weapons or technology, like all primitives do," he said. "We shall see," Queen Hana replied. "That is what makes this interesting." Jin led June through shining hallways to a room that would be his during his stay. The door slid open without a sound, revealing a space that was both strange and beautiful. "These are your quarters," Jin said with a small bow. "Please rest and think about your wish." June walked into the room, amazed at what he saw. The walls changed colors, slowly, like a sunset. The bed seemed to float above the floor. A large window showed the stars outside, more stars than June had ever seen from Earth. "This is all. A lot to take in," June said, sitting on the edge of the floating bed. It felt solid despite having no legs. Jin nodded. "I understand. The first time I saw humans, I was surprised too." "You've been to Earth?" June asked. "Several times. I study your people," Jin explained. "Your planet is young compared to others in the galaxy, but humans learn quickly." June had so many questions. These wishes, are there rules? Limits? Jin sat in a chair that formed itself from the floor. "Queen Hannah is very powerful, but not all powerful. You cannot wish for more wishes. You cannot wish to become a god. You cannot wish for something that would destroy entire worlds." "I wouldn't want any of those things," Jun said. Jin looked relieved. "Most beings ask for technology, wealth, or long life. And what happens after the 3 wishes? You return home with whatever gifts the Queen has granted you." June stood up and walked to the window. Earth was somewhere out there, though he couldn't see it among the countless stars. Why does she do this? Grant wishes to strangers. Jin was quiet for a moment. The Queen has lived for thousands of years. She has seen empires rise and fall. Granting wishes helps her understand new species, and it entertains her. Entertainment. June frowned. "So I'm just a show for her?" "No, not just that," Jin said quickly. "The Queen values new perspectives. The galaxy is very old, June. Those who have lived long lives can become stuck in their ways." A soft chime sounded, and food appeared on a table that rose from the floor. Strange fruits and meats that June had never seen before. "Please eat," Jin said. "I will return in the morning to bring you to the throne room." After Jin left, Jun tried the alien food. It tasted better than anything he had ever eaten. He explored his room, finding clothes that fit him perfectly and a bathroom with technology he didn't understand. He couldn't sleep. His mind was racing with thoughts about the wishes. What should he ask for? Money, knowledge, power. He could become the richest or smartest person on Earth. He could ask for technology to help humanity. But something felt wrong about those ideas. Jun was a simple mechanic. He fixed problems by understanding them first. His boss always said, "Jun, you never rush in. You watch, you learn, then you fix." As the ship's artificial night passed, Jun watched the stars and thought about Queen Hannah. She had lived for thousands of years. What would she expect from a human? What would surprise her? Morning came, announced by the room slowly brightening. Jin returned as promised. "Have you decided on your wish?" she asked. Jun nodded. "I think so." Jin led him back to the throne room. It was just as impressive in the ship's daytime cycle. The court had gathered again, aliens of all shapes and sizes, waiting to hear what the human would wish for. Queen Hannah sat on her flowing metal throne, looking even more regal than before. Commander Ta stood at her side, his face showing he expected little from the human. "June of Earth," Queen Hannah's voice rang out. "Have you considered your first wish?" June stepped forward and bowed his head slightly. "I have, Your Majesty." The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to hold still. "What do you wish for, human?" Queen Hannah asked, leaning forward with interest. "Speak, and if it is within my power, it shall be granted." June took a deep breath. He knew what he wanted now. It wasn't what anyone in this room would expect. The throne room was completely silent. Everyone waited to hear what the human would wish for. Commander Tae's hand rested on his weapon, as if he expected June to ask for something dangerous. Queen Hannah watched June with curious eyes. "Speak your wish, human." June stood straight and spoke in a clear voice. "My first wish is to spend one full day watching how you govern." For a moment, no one reacted. Then the room erupted with noise. Aliens turned to each other, talking in loud, Shocked voices. Some laughed, thinking it was a joke. Others looked angry, as if June had insulted the Queen. Commander Ta stepped forward, his face red with anger. This is mockery. He wastes the Queen's gift. Queen Hannah raised her hand, and everyone fell silent again. Her face showed surprise, but also something else. Interest. You wish to observe me? She asked June. Not for wealth, power, or knowledge for your planet. June nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. I wish to watch and learn how you rule 7 systems. Commander Ta moved closer to the Queen. My Queen, this must be a trick. Perhaps he plans to steal secrets or harm you. And how would he harm me, Commander? Queen Hannah asked with a slight smile. He is one human among our entire fleet. She turned back to June. In all my thousands of years granting wishes, no one has ever asked to simply observe. Why this wish, June of Earth? How can I know what to wish for when I don't understand your world? June replied. I'm a mechanic. I never fix something without first seeing how it works. Queen Hannah's eyes widened. She looked at June as if seeing him for the first time. Then she did something that shocked the court even more. She laughed. It was a warm, genuine laugh, not mocking but filled with delight. The sound filled the throne room, making the walls seem to glow brighter. Your wish is granted, June of Earth, she said when her laughter faded. Tomorrow, you will shadow me from the morning council to the evening star blessing. You will see how the 7 systems are governed. Commander Ta looked like he wanted to object, but he remained silent. Jin, standing nearby, smiled at June with new respect in her eyes. My Queen, one of the court advisors spoke up. There are sensitive matters to be discussed tomorrow. Military plans, trade negotiations, and June will observe them all, Queen Hannah said firmly. That is his wish, and I have granted it. She stood from her throne, and the metal shifted and flowed around her as if alive. Court is dismissed. June, you will return to your quarters and rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. As the court began to leave, June heard the aliens talking about him. Some sounded impressed, others confused. None had expected this wish. Jin approached him as he prepared to leave. That was unexpected, she said quietly. You've surprised everyone, especially the Queen. Is that good or bad? June asked. Jin smiled. The Queen has lived for thousands of years. Surprises are rare for her now. I think she is pleased. As they walked back to his room, June saw Commander Ta watching him from a distance, his eyes narrow with suspicion. The commander doesn't trust me, June said. Jin nodded. He protects the Queen. He has fought in wars across 3 galaxies. Trust has not come easily to him. Back in his room, Jun sat by the window, looking at the stars. He wondered if he had made the right choice. Most people would have asked for something for themselves or for Earth. But Jun had always believed that knowledge came before action. How could he make good wishes without understanding this new world he had been thrown into? Tomorrow, he would see how a queen governed 7 star systems. Tomorrow, he would learn things no human had ever known. And then, maybe, he would know what to truly wish for. June woke early the next morning. Jin was already waiting outside his door, holding clothes that looked more formal than what he had worn before. The Queen begins her day in 1 hour, Jin said. These clothes mark you as her official observer for today. The outfit was simple but made of a material that seemed to change color slightly as June moved. A small pin shaped like the Queen's crown was attached to the collar. After June dressed and ate, Jin led him to a small meeting room where Queen Hannah sat at a round table with 5 other beings. They all looked up when June entered. My observer arrives, Queen Hannah said with a small smile. Come, June. Sit and watch. June took an empty seat against the wall. Commander Ta stood nearby, watching him closely. This is the morning council, Jin whispered. The Queen meets with her closest advisors first thing each day. June listened as they discussed problems across the 7 systems. A water shortage on a desert planet, a trade dispute between two species, a star that was dying faster than expected, threatening three worlds that orbited it. Queen Hannah listened to each problem carefully. She asked smart questions. When she made decisions, she explained her thinking clearly. Move 10 water ships to planet Doran, she told one advisor, but teach the people there how to find and save their own water too. We help now, they help themselves later. June was impressed. She didn't just solve today's problems. She thought about tomorrow too. After the morning council, they moved to a huge room with maps of stars and planets floating in the air. Representatives from dozens of worlds waited there. The open court, Jin explained. Anyone from any world can bring concerns directly to the Queen. For 3 hours, Queen Hannah listened to people's problems. Some were big, like preventing a war between two planets. Others were small, like settling an argument between neighbors. To Jun's surprise, she gave the same careful attention to the small problems as the big ones. During a short break, Queen Hannah approached Jun. "What do you think so far?" she asked. "You're different than I expected," Jun admitted. "When someone has power over 7 systems, I thought you'd only care about the big things." Queen Hannah nodded. Small things become big things if ignored. A fight between neighbors today can be a war between cities tomorrow. Next came the Science Council, where the Queen reviewed new discoveries and technologies. Then the Military Council, where Commander Ta presented reports on threats to the 7 systems. During this meeting, Commander Ta seemed particularly upset by Jun's presence. "My Queen, the human should leave for this discussion," he insisted. "We are talking about defense systems." Queen Hannah shook her head. "His wish was to observe everything, Commander. I gave my word." Jun noticed how the commander always wanted more ships, more weapons, but Queen Hannah often chose diplomatic solutions instead. "War is easy to start, hard to end," she told Tai at one point. "I have seen too many worlds destroyed because leaders chose the easy path." By evening, Jun's head was swimming with all he had learned. The final meeting was in a beautiful garden room, where the Queen performed something called the Evening Star Blessing, a quiet ceremony for the health of all worlds in her systems. As the day ended, Queen Hannah asked Jun to walk with her along a path that showed the stars through a clear ceiling. "You've been quiet, Jun, always watching, rarely speaking," she said. "Most observers ask many questions. I'm trying to understand it all," Jun replied. "You make hard choices all day, but you always explain why. You listen more than you talk. You think about the future, not just the present." Queen Hannah looked at him with curiosity in her eyes. "And does this help you know what to wish for next?" Jun nodded slowly. "I think it might. Thank you for granting my strange wish." "It was not strange," Queen Hannah said softly. "It was wise." After the long day of observing, Jun expected to return to his room. Instead, Queen Hannah invited him to a small dining area with a view of space that took his breath away. "Please, join me," she said, sitting at a simple table. "After watching me all day, you must have questions." Jun sat across from her. The table filled with foods he had never seen before. No servants were present, just the two of them. "Where are your guards? Where is Commander Ta?" Jun asked, surprised by the lack of security. Queen Hannah smiled. "This room is more protected than it appears, but I wanted to speak with you alone." She took a small bite of something blue and glowing. "Now tell me why you really wish to observe me today." Jun thought carefully before answering. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'Look before you leap.' It means understand something before taking action." "We have a similar saying across the 7 systems," Queen Hannah replied, "though most beings forget it when offered 3 wishes." They ate in silence for a moment. The stars outside seemed to move slowly as the ship drifted through space. "May I ask you something, Your Majesty?" Jun finally said. "Please do. You've ruled for thousands of years. Does it ever get lonely?" Queen Hannah's eyes widened slightly. No one had asked her such a personal question in centuries. Yes, she admitted. When you live as long as I have, you watch friends, advisors, even whole species come and go. It is the price of long life. Is that why you grant these wishes? For company? The queen looked out at the stars. Partly, but also to remember what it feels like to be new, to see things with fresh eyes. She turned back to June. Your reaction to my court today reminded me how strange and wonderful it truly is. I had forgotten. June nodded. Sometimes we need an outsider to see what we've stopped noticing. Tell me about Earth, Queen Hannah said, changing the subject. Jin studies your people, but I want to hear from you. June told her about his home, his small garage, the city of Seoul. He spoke of Earth's beauty and problems, its wars and peace, its many different peoples and cultures. We make many mistakes, June said, but we learn from them too. Slowly, but we learn. All species do, Queen Hannah replied. The ones who survive, anyway. Have you seen civilizations fall? June asked. Many, she said sadly. Often because their leaders forgot to listen. They believed they knew everything already. She stared directly at June. That is the greatest danger of age, thinking you have nothing left to learn. They talked through the ship's night. Queen Hannah shared stories of planets June could barely imagine. He told her about simple things from Earth that made her curious. Children playing in parks, street food vendors, the changing of seasons. Your world sounds both primitive and wonderful, Queen Hannah said, full of small joys my people have forgotten. As their conversation went on, June noticed the queen becoming more relaxed, more open. She spoke less like a ruler and more like a person. You know, she said, Commander Tai and my advisors expected you to wish for weapons or technology, things that would make Earth powerful. Would you have granted those wishes? June asked. No, she admitted. New species with advanced technology often destroy themselves. I would have found a way to give you something else. I'm not interested in weapons, June said. I fix things, not break them. Queen Hannah smiled. I believe you have given me something without meaning to, June. What's that? Perspective, she said. It has been a long time since I simply talked with someone who saw me as a person, not just a queen. As the ship's artificial dawn began to brighten the room, Queen Hannah stood. Rest today, she said. Tomorrow you will make your second wish, and I find myself very curious about what it will be. As June returned to his room, he realized he now knew exactly what to wish for next. The next day, the throne room was more crowded than before. Word had spread about the human's unusual first wish. Many important people from across the 7 systems had come to hear what he would wish for next. June stood before Queen Hannah's throne. He had slept well, knowing exactly what he wanted to ask for. Jin stood nearby, giving him an encouraging smile. Commander Ta looked tense. He had placed more guards around the room, still not trusting June despite the Queen's favor. June of Earth, Queen Hannah spoke, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. Are you ready to make your second wish? I am, Your Majesty, June replied, his voice steady. The crowd fell silent. Even the air felt still, as if the ship itself was listening. Then speak your wish, and if it is within my power, it shall be granted, said the Queen. June took a deep breath. I wish for you to establish a council of representatives from the youngest sentient species in your domain, including humans, to advise on galactic decisions. For the second time, the throne room erupted with noise. Some aliens shouted in anger. Others argued loudly among themselves. A few nodded in agreement. Commander Ta stepped forward, his face dark with anger. This is outrageous. The human asks us to let primitives help rule the 7 systems. Queen Hannah raised her hand, and silence fell again. Her face showed surprise, but also deep thought. Explain your wish, June, she said. Why do you ask for this? Yesterday I watched you solve many problems, June said. You are wise, But even you said age can make one forget to see things in new ways. He looked around the room. Young species like humans might see solutions that older ones cannot. An elderly advisor stepped forward. My queen, this is foolish. What could new species know about governing galaxies? They would be like children at the table of adults. Sometimes children ask the questions adults have forgotten to ask, Jun replied. He turned back to Queen Hana. You told me yourself that the greatest danger of age is thinking you have nothing left to learn. Queen Hana's eyes widened as he used her own words. Her living metal throne shifted and swirled around her as she considered the request. The human makes an interesting point, she finally said. Our oldest civilizations have been solving problems the same ways for thousands of years. Perhaps fresh eyes would see new paths. Commander Ta shook his head. These young species will bring chaos. They fight wars on their own planets. How can they help bring peace to others? Because they still remember the cost of those wars, Jun answered. The pain is fresh to them, not ancient history. Queen Hana stood from her throne. The court watched, holding their breath. I have decided, she announced. Jun's wish shall be granted. I will establish a council of emerging voices with representatives from the 5 youngest spacefaring species in our domain, including humans. She looked directly at Commander Ta. They will not rule, Commander. They will advise. The final decisions will remain mine. Ta did not look happy, but he bowed his head in acceptance. The council will meet 4 times each year, Queen Hana continued. They will bring new perspectives to old problems. She smiled at Jun. This is an unusual wish. Most beings ask for things that benefit only themselves or their home world. A better galaxy benefits everyone, including Earth, Jun said simply. Queen Hana nodded with approval. You continue to surprise me, Jun of Earth. She turned to Jin. Begin arrangements to contact the young species we will invite to this council. Earth will need to select their representatives soon. As the court slowly broke into small groups discussing this unexpected development, Jin approached Jun. You could have asked for anything for yourself, she said. Why this? Jun smiled. Because it was the right thing to wish for. And because now, humans will have a voice in the stars. From across the room, Jun noticed Queen Hana watching him, with new respect in her ancient eyes. 3 months passed after Jun made his second wish. During this time, he stayed aboard the Queen's ship, waiting for the Council of Emerging Voices to take shape. Earth had been shocked to learn they were not alone in the universe. Queen Hana had sent a small ship to make peaceful contact. After the initial panic, world leaders selected 5 representatives to meet the aliens. One of them was Jun's old boss, Ms. Park, who was known for her clear thinking and calm nature. Now, the first meeting of the council was about to begin. Jun stood in a large round room with 5 tables arranged in a circle. At each table sat representatives from the 5 youngest spacefaring species in the 7 systems. Humans from Earth sat at one table. The Narans, with their blue skin and 4 arms, sat at another. The tree-like Vorans, who communicated through light patterns on their bark, took the third. The small, quick-moving Kira were at the 4th, while the crystal-bodied Lumi sat at the 5th. Queen Hana entered the room, and everyone stood. She wore simpler clothes than usual, trying to make the new species feel more comfortable. Welcome, she said. Today marks a new chapter in the history of the 7 systems. For too long we have relied only on the wisdom of the oldest. Now we will also listen to the fresh ideas of the youngest. Commander Ta stood at the back of the room, his face showing he still did not approve. Jin sat near Jun, excited to see what would happen. Your first task, Queen Hana continued, is to examine a problem that has troubled us for 200 years. The twin planets of the Soren system are fighting over water rights to their shared moon. Despite many attempts, we have found no solution that satisfies both sides. Screens appeared in the air, showing information about the conflict. The older advisors had already tried force, trade deals, and splitting the moon in half. Nothing had worked. For 3 days, the council met, At first, they were shy, especially the humans who had never been in space before, but soon they began to share ideas openly. On the fourth day, the human representative Ms. Park spoke up. On Earth, we had a similar problem with countries fighting over river water. Instead of dividing the water, we created a system where everyone worked together to keep the river clean and healthy. Both sides gained more than they would have alone. The Narans built on this idea. The Vorans added their knowledge of water purification. The Kira suggested a fast building system, while the Lumi offered special crystals that could detect pollution. Together, they created a plan where both planets would jointly manage the moon's water, sharing both the work and the benefits. When they presented their solution to Queen Hana, she was amazed. In 200 years, no one suggested working together instead of dividing the resource, she said. We were so focused on who owns what, we never thought of shared ownership. Commander Ta looked surprised too. It might actually work, he admitted reluctantly. Over the next months, more problems were brought to the council. Each time, they found solutions that the older species had missed. A mining dispute was solved by creating jobs for both sides. A dangerous space route was made safer by ideas from Earth sailors who knew about currents and tides. Queen Hana began to rely more and more on the council's advice. The 7 systems started to change. Old enemies began working together. New ideas spread quickly. One evening, Queen Hana asked June to walk with her through the ship's garden. Your wish has transformed my rule, she told him. I had forgotten how important new perspectives are. I'm glad it worked, June said. Everyone benefits when all voices are heard. The Queen nodded. You still have one wish left, June. Have you decided what it will be? Yes, June replied. I've been thinking about it for a long time. Queen Hana looked at him with curiosity. And will this final wish surprise me as much as the others? June smiled. I hope so, Your Majesty. I really hope so. A year had passed since June was taken from his garage in Seoul. The day had come for his third and final wish. The throne room was packed with beings from across the 7 systems, more than had ever gathered before. The Council of Emerging Voices sat in a special section near the throne. Ms. Park nodded to June as he entered. The representatives from the other young species watched him with respect. In just 1 year, his wishes had changed the 7 systems for the better. Queen Hana sat on her throne, which flowed and shifted with more energy than usual. She looked different than when June had first met her, more alive, more engaged with the world around her. Even Commander Tai seemed less stern. After the council had helped resolve a military conflict without a single shot being fired, he had begun to see the value in new perspectives. Jin stood beside June as he approached the throne. She had become a good friend over the past year. Are you nervous? She whispered. A little, June admitted. But I know what I want. Queen Hana raised her hand, and the room fell silent. June of Earth, she said, her voice clear and strong. You have used your wishes with wisdom I have rarely seen in my long life. Your first wish sought understanding. Your second wish created positive change for all. Now the time has come for your third and final wish. The crowd waited, completely silent. What would this unusual human ask for now? Surely after proving his wisdom, he would finally request something for himself or his planet. June stepped forward and bowed slightly to the Queen. Your Majesty, he said, for my final wish, I ask that humanity be given 1,000 years to develop on our own terms, with knowledge of the galactic community but protection from interference, after which we will join as full members, bringing all we've learned with us. The throne room remained silent, but this time it was a thoughtful silence. No one shouted in anger or surprise. Instead, people turned to each other and nodded, seeing the wisdom in this request. Queen Hana leaned forward on her throne. You wish for isolation, after all the good that has come from contact between species. Not isolation, June explained. Knowledge. We now know we're not alone in the universe. That changes everything for us. But we need time to grow in our own way, to solve our own problems, to become the best version of humanity we can be. He looked around the room. The council shows what young species can offer. Imagine what humanity might bring to the 7 systems after 1,000 years of development with the goal of joining you. Commander Ta stepped forward, but not in anger. The human speaks wisdom. A species forced to advance too quickly often loses what makes them special. They simply copy the older species. Queen Hannah nodded slowly. You could have asked for advanced technology, for weapons, for personal power. Instead, you ask for time, not just for yourself, but for your entire species. Earth has its problems, Jun said. Wars, pollution, inequality. We need to solve these ourselves, or we won't be ready to join the larger community. But knowing that community exists, knowing we have a place waiting for us, that will give us purpose. Queen Hannah stood. Her throne shifted and flowed around her as she made her decision. Your wish is granted, June of Earth. For 1,000 years, Earth will be protected from outside interference. Knowledge of our existence will be shared with your leaders. The Council of Emerging Voices will continue, with Earth's seat waiting for when you return as full members. She stepped down from her throne and approached June directly, something no one had ever seen her do before. In all my thousands of years granting wishes, she said quietly, yours have been the wisest. You wished not for yourself, but for understanding, for connection, and for the good of your people. June bowed his head. Thank you, Your Majesty. No, June of Earth, Queen Hannah replied. Thank you for reminding me what leadership truly means. 2 days later, Jun returned to Earth, to his garage in Seoul, but he did not return alone. He went as humanity's first ambassador, carrying the knowledge that the stars held friends waiting for them when they were ready. And somewhere in the vastness of space, a queen who had lived for thousands of years looked toward a small blue planet with new hope in her ancient eyes. Asterisk, the end asterisk.